Hey everybody, Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, and I'm shooting kind of a different video for you today, something I haven't really done before, which is to walk you through a Nib Nook writing sample. So the Nib Nook is a tool that we've had on the website for 7 or 8 years now at this point. We have every single nib, every single pen that we carry on our site. We will do a writing sample. I personally will do a writing sample. We scan it in, digitally record it, and allow you to compare it to other writing samples. So you can see how one pen works from another. So I have a pen with me that's a new pen, the Platinum Curidas. It's got a new nib, and I have 3 different nib sizes to do the writing comparisons for it. So I thought I would just kind of walk you through and show you how I do it. So just some of my supplies, basics that I have here. Always standardize on Rhodia number 18 dot pad paper. These dots are 5 millimeters apart. It's nice and standard. Rhodia makes very consistent products, so it lasts for years and years and years with being very similar, so that when I'm comparing something that I wrote years ago, I know it's going to look identical. I also have just a paper towel, or you could use a napkin or whatever, just something to blot away the ink. And then I have the ink itself, which is Noodler's Black, another standard that I went on a long time ago, and every single writing sample in our Nib Nook is with Noodler's Black. And then of course I have the pens themselves, which vary up depending on what they are. In this case, it's the Curidas in extra fine, fine, and medium. So let's go ahead and get to it, and I'll show you how I do these writing samples. First things I got to do is actually ink up the pens. So I've already inked up 2 of them, and I'll show you how I do the 3rd one. It's pretty straightforward if you've never been familiar with this process. The Curidas is a little bit different of a pen than most others. It's a retractable nib pen, so not something that is the same as most other fountain pens. If you're familiar with the Pilot Vanishing Point or the Lamy Dialogue 3, it's kind of like that. So it has this nib unit on the inside. It can disassemble further, and it has a converter. You can use it with cartridges, but in this case, I'm using Noodler's Black, which does not come in cartridges. It's in bottles only. So I'm going to use it in its bottled form. So I just depress the converter down, put it down inside the ink. I've already given the ink a little bit of a shake ahead of time. I always like to do that because if the ink has been sitting for a while, you could be getting a different, mixture of the ink than we would have had in other writing samples. So consistency is key when doing these from one pen across the other. So we try to keep as many variables the same as possible. Okay, so once I have that inked, put it back in. I've blotted away some with the extra paper towel here. And then whenever you ink up a pen for the first time, it's always going to have a little more ink saturated into the feed than it would after you've been writing for a little while. So what I want is for there to be some consistency in the writing. I don't want it to show what the writing sample looks like with a pen that's extremely saturated. So whenever I ink up a pen for the Nib Nook for the first time, I always take and I touch the nib to a paper towel to kind of wick away the excess ink that's in the feed. Now, pens like this, the filler hole is actually further up here. It's not in the feed. It doesn't have a lot of fins or anything that are going to hold a ton of ink there. So it's not necessarily critical that I do that step to its fullest. And then I just make sure that the feed is nice and primed. So I'll go ahead and do just some swirls and scribbles and stuff like that. Make sure I'm getting good, consistent flow, not getting any blotches. Make sure that the pen's feeling good. Sometimes I'll visually inspect if the pen just doesn't feel quite right. I'll visually inspect it with a loop or something like that, just to make sure that the pen that I'm going to be showing for the Nib Nook is an accurate representation, because this one pen is going to represent basically all nib sizes of the Platinum Curidas on our site from heretofore. So I have that, so I've done that on my separate sheet. Now I'm ready for the official writing sample. All right, so let me talk you through kind of the general layout of the Nib Nook. So I have these dot markers, and because it's standardized on the website, I have to make sure that I'm actually writing this to the exact same dots every single time that I do it. So I always make sure that I put the name, the brand, and the model of the pen, which nib size I'm writing with. I do some X's, I do some figure 8s, and then I do 2 sets of lines, which I'll explain to you in just a minute. So usually I like to start out in some kind of order, usually with the finer nib, and then I go to a broader nib. But it doesn't particularly matter, because essentially once we scan these on the website, these are all going to get saved individually by nib size. and we can rearrange them and splice and dice them however we like. So what I'm going to do here, I know, after having done this many times, that there's going to be 5 dots in between each writing sample. So I just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I only have 3 pens, so why would I keep on going? Well, because sometimes I screw it up. It just happens. Now I know, after having done this for many years, that a lot of times I can make a mistake, and I'll go through and I'll write all these pen, things and all these nib sizes and everything, and then I go to tear out the sheet of paper and it goes rogue and I end up ripping right through my writing sample and I have to redo the whole thing. That's really annoying. So now what I do when I do it is I actually take and I tear out the sheet from the notebook, and then I just place it right back in place. So I still get the same benefits of the measurements and everything, but I know I have not ruined all of my hard work yet. Okay, so I now have the extra fine here, so I'm going to start out by writing the name, Platinum, and I always write it in cursive. Okay, and a lot of times you can't tell the difference between my N's, my M's, and my U's, so when I write Platinum, it just looks crazy. So Platinum, this is the Curidas. And then this is an extra fine. Now sometimes there's so many words and I just run out of space. See, I went right up to that line right there. I'm okay here, but sometimes I'll go too far and I have to start over and do it again. But that's okay, I got plenty of space on this paper. I'll do some X's. I'm not super strict about where I put the X's. And then I give a little bit of space, and then I do some figure eights. Now a nib like this, that's pretty fine and does not have a whole lot of line variation, you're like, what does this do? But when you have things like flex nibs, or you have a stub or something like that that has some variation in its cross and downstrokes, that's where the X's and the figure eights really come into play. Now the double lines. If you just look at this, you can't always tell what's going on. But what I do with the double line is I always make sure that I have it exactly perpendicular, and I'll do a cross stroke on that first line. And then I turn it 90 degrees, and I make sure to do a draw stroke. So essentially it's just accentuating that cross and downstroke again, just like the X's and the figure eights do. But if you have something like a stub or something like that, these double lines are going to look very different. So the top one there is always going to be a cross stroke. The bottom one is always going to be essentially a downstroke that's sideways. And I did not screw anything up royally. Generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with that. My handwriting's not the best, but you know what? It's been consistent with all the other Nib Nooks that we've ever done, so I'm kind of stuck with it. You would think after many years of doing this, my handwriting might be better, but alas, it is what it is. Okay, next I have the fine nib. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that I write with that on the sample sheet and that we're in good shape here. Okay, so now I'm going to write with this one again, Platinum. Okay, Curidas. Fine. Okay. Not a huge difference between these. I can tell even just as I'm writing. The extra fine is a little bit toothier, puts on a little bit finer line. But honestly, the fine nib is really pretty fine. Me personally, when it comes to most Japanese nibs, the fine nib is more my preference as opposed to the extra fine. There we go. Not really a lot of line variation. I'm not really pressing hard because I know this is a stiff steel nib. I'm not really going to get any flex, so I'm not really pushing for that. If I did have a pen that had flex, oops, forgot to dot my I. If I did have a pen with flex, I would put a little more pressure on the downstroke of the X. I'd put a little bit of pressure on the downstroke on the figure eights, and I would try and flex out that downstroke bottom line of the double lines as well. And last but not least, I have my medium nib, and this one I think you'll see is quite a bit different. I find that with most of the Japanese nibs, there tends to be a big jump between fine and medium. Platinum Curidas medium. Boom. Look how much darker that is. You can tell the ink is going down a lot wetter. It's much darker. Feels a little smoother on the plus side. You know, when you get these medium nibs and broads and things like that, a lot of times it's going to put down a wetter line because you get more capillary action that's drawing the ink out of the pen. And it just has more surface area that's making contact with the paper on the tip of that nib. So it tends to ride a little smoother, write a little wetter. That's personally why I do like things like mediums and broads. So there we go. So now I have my writing sample complete for all 3 nibs. I'm very pleased that I did not screw anything up because it makes for a better video, but it is nothing unusual for me to have, I don't know, half a sheet of completely messed up writing samples. But this one actually ends up working okay. So what you're seeing here is now essentially a completed Nib Nook writing sample. So what I would do at this point is I would clean out the pens, and I'm not going to worry about that at that point. Then we would bring these in, we digitally scan them, make sure that they look consistent with the other writing samples we've done in terms of their coloration and stuff, and then go ahead and put them up on the website under resources on gouletpens.com under the Nib Nook. And you can compare the Curidas to each other as well as to every other pen that we carry at gouletpens.com. So it takes a little bit of time to do this, but it gives me and my team a really good perspective on what it's like to write with the pens, because essentially we have institutional knowledge of having written with every single pen, every single nib that we've ever carried, as well as gives you a nice something to look at as you're browsing the site, and you can compare it to pens that you have or other pens that you want as you're shopping. Hope you like this video. If you're interested in seeing more writing samples of Nib Nooks, I can consider doing maybe more of these in the future, but I thought I would just test it out while I had to do Nib Nooks anyway and give it a shot. So let me know what you think in the comments on YouTube. Would love to get your feedback on it. Hope you enjoyed this video today. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.